Welcome to PRT, Paranormal Round Table. I'm your host, Josh Turner, and this is part 2 of the interviews with the Atristain couple. And you guys can follow me on YouTube, on many different platforms. We're on Spotify, SoundCloud. Please, if you follow me on the other platforms, go to YouTube and like and subscribe because that helps us out. And also, we have a website, prtpodcast.com. It's prtpodcast.com. If you have a crazy story to send me, scary story or something unusual, weird, strange, whatever, you can email me at daswolfman88@gmail.com, daswolfman88@gmail.com. Now, this is part 2, and so we're going to go ahead and jump right in and get to that.
Would you log in like over 500 to 1,000 hours just on interviews and work there?
Well, it wasn't. I wouldn't say that much.
Okay.
We did a lot of interviews during that time period, and a lot of miles, a lot of staying over there, and whatever it was, did not want to show its hand. It wanted to. In my impression was, it wanted to isolate her, make her feel like that there was no hope, nobody can help you, nobody's going to believe you. But, in this particular case, I took a little more interest in it because it felt in my heart. I knew that there was something going on. And I was very doubtful. I was very skeptical up until that night because, nothing had ever happened while we were there. It always after we leave, which is suspicious in and of itself.
True.
But
True, that would definitely raise the ears and about.
Yeah, but knowing how these things work, that's pretty par for the course.
So the question I got real quick is, did you guys ever figure out what it was that invited it in, for lack of better words?
I think I did. During the initial interviews, I knew that something spurs these things on. Sometimes, very rarely do these things just happen. I interviewed the lady, and I asked her, I do basically what I do with the people I work with. I do a timeline interview from the time they can remember all the way up till present time or to when they start experiencing the whatever activity that might be happening. And she told me that she had a friend of hers from work who was somewhat attracted to her. And it got to the point where he was starting to stalk her. It was very, annoying. He'd show up in the morning, try to talk his way into the house, and just got very, very obsessive with her. And one time she told him, hey, stop it. I don't want to see you anymore. This is getting strange. I'm married. I'm not interested. Just leave me alone. Well, supposedly he grabbed some of her hair and pulled the hair out of her head and wrapped it around his finger and says, that's okay. I got a love spell or something like that I could use. And I think it was a year before this stuff started. Now, that could be the cause of this, but I'm not altogether certain. But it sure sounds like it could be. It could have been that because he was also into dabbling in the occult. He had the Necronomicon book and all these spell books, spell conjuring books, and so forth. And I have a strong suspicion that that's how this thing developed because it was attacking her. And a lot of the time, anytime that she and her husband were getting along good, it would pop up. And I strongly suspect that was probably the cause of what happened. He probably put a curse on her, and it ran its course. And I just hope that whoever did this, he's going to have problems as well.
I was thinking, Ouija board or her messing around with something like that because I'm.
Well, she didn't. She didn't dabble in the Ouija. She didn't dabble in the play with the Ouija board or anything like that. It was part of our initial questioning. But that's the only explanation I can give. Now, I'm not certain. I don't have any degree of certainty that is precisely what happened. But I'm suspecting. I highly suspect that's what happened.
Wow. So did you guys ever get any information on this guy that was stalking her?
No, we did not. I didn't want to make contact with him. My focus at the time was helping her.
Right. Yeah. It would have been interesting to know what exactly he was into, not that you could do anything to prosecute him or anything, but it would just good to know information, because wow, that is just, she took a ride, for lack of better words, she took a ride from hell.
Yeah.
No pun intended.
A lot of these cases are, they're not very clear cut as far as actual causes and so forth. You're always going to have a mystery associated with some of these cases, because you can't find out everything, But this case follows me sometimes. I did a interview with a local newspaper here on the town we live in. It was for a Halloween type of special, and I told them about this particular case, and they wrote an article on it. And the reporter was using an audio tape. It was a magnetic, old, small microcassette magnetic tape to take his notes with, because generally he wants to capture the whole interview, not miss anything. So he was taping me, and I was talking. And after the interview, he called me a couple of days later, and he says, "Can you come out of the office? I need to talk with you." And I said, "Sure. What's the problem?" He says, "There's something on the audio tape I need you to hear." So I went to his office at the newspaper, and to begin with, the interview took place in kind of a soundproof room. I think the walls were and so forth. There was no extra noises in the room. We didn't discern anything that could have caused what he'd heard. But he played the tape back, and during the process of me talking, you heard what sounded like a dog fight in the background, a vicious dog fight. If it sounds similar, but not exact. If you look at the movie Exorcist, at the opening scenes of The Exorcist, when they have the dogs fighting in Iraq, the older priest, confronts the demonic statue and so forth. It sounded something like that, and we could not explain it. Now, but keep in mind too, this tape he uses over and over again. There could be some artifacts on the tape that may cause something like that. And I sent it to a couple of people in our group, and they couldn't explain it. Only that if it's an older tape, it may be an artifact, but I don't know of an artifact that sounds like that. And the guy had been using this particular tape recorder for 3 years,
and he couldn't recall recording dogs. I mean, it was pretty vicious. You would have recalled if you recorded.
Correct. Yeah. Something very blatant and obvious when it comes to that. Yeah, you would. Well, a dogfight is something. Even recording it, something you don't forget it quite easily.
Yeah.
What's funny too, though, about when you were talking about The Exorcist, that statue was of a demon that's not even. That demon is actually known for pestilence.
Wow, that whole case is just, gosh, it was.
I thought it was odd though that the way they make these movies, they sensationalize it, and it shows. I don't even want to say the demon's name. It starts with a P, but they showed him, and it's like he's the demon of sickness. I mean, that's not really. Because a lot of these demons, just like humans, they specialize in certain things.
Exactly.
So,
And that's why you have to get the demon's name, right? That's the whole thing that you miss on these TV shows. I mean, and just talking about sort of pop culture, Rick and I had even people at our church, people in the ghost group, have said, "Have you guys seen this new show called Evil? And it's on CBS." And I'm like, I don't watch network TV really. Right. And they said, "Well, you should watch it." So I said, "Well, I'll watch it." And I'll say that, first of all, it gets the Catholic Church wrong. It gets it wrong in the Catholic Church. They have a seminarian who's like doing shrooms or something to have visions of God. So that's not accurate. But what is accurate, I will say what is accurate is that a lot of the cases they show, particularly in that very first episode, it's not clear cut if this guy's a psychopath or if there's demonic influence. And so that part is accurate for it. I'll give them that. It's interesting, but that's the problem.
Yeah, with television, that's the problem. You've got to, they've got to put shows on the network that are palatable, and embellishment is part of that process to make them palatable to the masses.
Just whatever looks cool.
Yeah, and
yes,
because I know that I've heard a few people say that. And these are people message on Facebook, and everything else that they were approached by a big time production company, big professional outfit, as they said, and they wanted their story, but they were going to have them sign waivers and this, and that, so that basically meant that they could take the story and twist it, cut it, chop it up, and do whatever they want.
And they do. They do. I mean, I was a guest star on Ghost Hunters, the original Ghost Hunters, back in 2005. And at the Chesapeake House, ironically, the Chesapeake House, the very first house we went to, they went out there. We didn't actually capture anything, but seeing the filming and the way they do things, yeah, we've been around for a while, so we've been approached and done a lot of like test reels for different companies that wanted to do things. And at the end of the day, we're like, look, this is what we do. We're not ghost adventurers. We're not any of that crap.
Yeah, you're not looking for TV ratings, right?
Exactly. Like if you want to see what the scientific method is, and really, the group that I've managed to be lucky enough to attract, really brilliant folks. We've got, college professors, scientists from NASA and the military, and we're truly doing actual science. Like if I were to show you some of our results, they're not sexy, they're Excel graphs, which make us very excited, but they're not sexy and not interesting probably for the general audience to talk about, but it's trying to quantify this. And so when the producers hear, oh, well, that's okay, well, we'll keep you in mind, which basically means no one's going to watch that.
Right. Yeah, it's the numbers. The numbers aren't sexy. And of course, and that's the unfortunate thing that, the creative license, if you sign it and give them the creative license to do what they want, well, then your story will not come out how how it happened to you. And that's unfortunate. But then again, it is a business for those networks and so on and so forth. I just find it really, really interesting, the amount of time you guys put into that case, though. Holy smokes.
But that's what it requires. And that's why I wanted to talk about, that case and the Kentucky case. These are not, slam bam.
Overnighters, right? They're not a weekend outing, right?
There's a lot of work. And I mean, for Kentucky, that was a 12-hour drive. And we went up there 2 or 3 different times. The Northern Virginia case, that was a good 3 hours from us one way, that involves some hotel stays and things and a lot of weekends. And that one weekend that he talked about where they actually got the evidence, that was my birthday weekend. That was actually Rick's birthday weekend. We're both April babies. And so probably where I wanted to be on my birthday weekend was not on an investigation necessarily. Let's be honest. And I was actually at the hotel. I went back to the hotel room because I was having an allergy attack, and I was hyped up on the Benadryl, right, when this happened. But that's what it takes, and I could give you all of the misadventures of paranormal research. After 20 years, there's lots of stories. And we just recently, in the past couple of years, formed the we're part of the Virginia chapter for the North American Dogman Project. And a lot of folks have never heard of Dogman. And I know Josh, and that's how I learned about Josh, being on Vic Cundiff's show. You talk about Dogman and you say, yeah, it looks like a werewolf, but it's not. And people are like, do what? Like Bigfoot is more socially acceptable than a dogman. And I'm like, look.
Well, let's talk about that for a second, because I wanted to say there is a demon whose name starts with an A. I'm not going to say it, but
we went to Egypt and saw him all over the place. I know exactly who you're talking
about. And his name is, and so you know who I'm talking about.
Yes.
It's
God of the underworld.
Yes. 2 parts, A, and then, yes. But you're not talking, you're talking about Anubis, right?
Yes, Anubis.
Well, I'm actually referring to another one that starts with an A.
Oh, okay.
And I don't know if you know who that is, but he's a wolf head. It's not a jackal head as the Anubis. I don't believe so much in the Anubis as being like, I think he was a Nephilim. That's my belief. But I do believe that this other one was one of the original rebellious angels. And he fell with, I believe it was Lucifer, yes. But he is a wolf-headed entity. And now so many people will fight you tooth and nail. Now, what I saw looked flesh and blood. But that doesn't mean that it wasn't a manifestation. And I've had many people tell me now, and I've had people that are hardcore dogman people that believe that they're flesh and blood, but they also know that there are skinwalkers and that there is an element to these things that are spiritual. That some of them they can be, and that these things can be a demonic manifestation of something. I believe that's and then we're talking about the names of the demons and what they do. The different I know this because I have studied that. I'm not like somebody that's all into it, like whatever, because I don't believe that you should give it too much
power
recognition. Yeah. And I don't believe in giving objects power either. I just know that sometimes things are obsessed on something and it happens. Now, I can tell you this. When my friend died back in 2011, he had PTSD, former military. He killed himself. Now, he was stalking his ex-wife. He was going after her. He was just had lost just was not in his right mind. And I loved him to death. He's one of my best friends that I ever had in my whole life. And when I tried talking to him, my brother tried talking to him, he was just obsessed. I mean, he could not stop stalking her. And it's what he was doing. And he was about to go to jail for about 6 months, I believe, for
the behavior.
Breaking a restraining order. Now, the day after he died, I had a long talk with his wife. She had called me. I was one of the first people that she called. She told me what happened. Now, I had a book sitting on my coffee table in my living room, okay? And I remember looking down at that book, and it was a book. It was called Demonology. That was the name of the book. I believe it was Rosemary Ellen Guiley that might have wrote it.
Yeah.
And so I just was looking at the book, and something just told me to pick it up and open it. And I just did. I opened it to the A's. And there in the A's was the name of a demon. And when I began to read it, which I've talked about this demon before when I talked about King Solomon, it said that he is what he does is cause marital strife.
Correct.
And then it said that he was obsessed with a woman named Sarah. Now, my friend's wife's name was Sarah, and it creeped me out so bad. And it was almost like I felt in my heart that not only did this demon, was he saying, yes, this is what I did. This is I did this,
It's like, come and look at my handiwork.
Yeah, it was like, but it was mockingly, like it was saying, yeah, I did it, and it was like wanting me to see it. And it made me physically ill. It made me sick to think about that could be, and it was so weird because I just picked the book up and opened it right there. And I was just like, wow. Now I know Rosemary Ellen Guiley, she wrote about, these demons, and then she wrote another one about angels. They all have names. And that, I just don't want to give them too much credence and say the names of these things or whatever.
If you want to check it out, go read those books.
Go read the books, yeah. And it's in the A's, and he's one of them.
He's a dog-headed.
No. That's a different one. No. That's a different one. That's a different one.
Sorry,
this
folks.
one is, his name starts with an A, but he is the demon of marital strife, and he was obsessed with a woman named Sarah, and my friend's wife's name was Sarah. And their marriage had deteriorated because of his behavior, and he began to act very uncharacteristic. And I could feel when I would talk to him, like there was something on him, attached to him, that was causing him to act erratic and caused her to get away from him.
It sounds like classic obsession.
Yes. And he wouldn't leave her alone. And I tried talking to him before he committed suicide. A few days before that, I had told him, look, I was going through a lot at that time. I was raising my nephew who was having a lot of problems. And I was not in a position where running my business and trying to deal with him in his troubled teens,
Yeah, you were dealing with the troubled teen.
Yeah, I was dealing with Zane, my nephew. And so he's a good kid now, but he used to have a lot of problems. And so there again, his mother was a dabbler in the occult, and she caused a lot of problems for him. And so I couldn't leave to go get my friend up in Colorado, which I was planning on doing, and I had already set plans to get up there to go get him. And because I had spoken with his son, and I was like, he was my godson, he is. And I was like, I'm going to try and help him, but it was like, just out of the blue, he did that. And the next day, his wife called me like that morning and said, he's took his own life. And
that's the goal for the demonic.
Yes,
the ultimate goal is to have someone take their own life. Exactly. That's which is unfortunate.
Another thing too, I really, there was more to that. What happened later, I started having these dreams, about him, not like he was being tormented, but he was trapped. And then my mom, who had never met him, my dad had met him, but my mother had never met him. She started having dreams about him and asking me who he was because she didn't know exactly what he looked like. And when I described him, she started talking about it. And then my nephew, who I adopted as my son or whatever, I mean, he's pretty much, I had custody of him. He began to have dreams about him and asking me who he was. And
you have to be very careful because the demonic, the preternatural, the angelic realm, they have a lot of influence over our imaginations and our and dream states. They have a lot of influence, and they could create dream states which would cause you to be curious and want to seek out certain things. Hence, seances, divination, that type of thing. So you have to be very careful. They can create these dream states easily and cause you to question and get interested, cause an undue amount of interest in this type of thing. So you have to be real careful.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Like I said.
Yeah, believe me, I'm not messing with any. I'm not into Ouija boards. I'm not into communicating with anything if I can help it.
I am reiterating that myself. I've never had anything, but guess what? I just know. Ouija boards, get them out of here. No thanks.
Now, there was another lady, I know you know this, Sal, that had told us about a demonic something or other that had come out of playing with a Ouija board, and it did look like a wolf. It had a wolf's head, and they were seeing it in the window, and it was causing havoc. And even a Bigfoot type entity that someone saw that was hairy, it was shaggy.
Correct. We how we always, Rick, we always discuss, on our show, and it's always the continuous topic or theme is, at the end of the day, we look at each other like, how are all these things connected? That's the thing we're always asking ourselves, because we get so many strange stories from people, the sightings and events that happen to them. And so getting back to the dogman, as it's commonly known nowadays, the flesh and blood, sure. Yeah. The question is it natural born here in this 3-dimensional, realm of existence, or is it, has it been conjured, or has it came through a portal, whatever the case may be, however you want to look at it, that's always the question for us.
That is the question. I think that there are different types of dogmen. I think there are different types of dogmen phenomena. If you look theologically, the angelic can be into physical form. They can transform into physical form. It's all throughout the Bible where angels come in physical form. He can actually sit and eat with you. And I believe that the demonic can be in physical form. My background is I used to be with MUFON, which is a mutual UFO network, and I was a state director here in Virginia for about 5 years and a member for a total of 10. And what got me involved in paranormal was a lot of the cases I was involved with, especially specifically with abduction phenomena. There were a lot of paranormal aspects to the.
They were involved with that.
Yeah, to the abduction phenomena, precisely. A lot of poltergeist activity, a lot of haunted type activity, and Bigfoot activity. And then when I left MUFON, I went into the paranormal field, and I'm starting to see some connections there too. And now I'm into cryptids, Bigfoot, and the dogman phenomena, and I'm starting to see some crossover there.
So what is your take as far as before we I'll let you get back. Sorry to take you off point. What is your take on their intelligence levels, Sasquatch and the dogman?
I think specifically the dogman. I mean, under the Sasquatch, it's a bit more acceptable because we can look at it as a primate, but in very intelligent primate. But the dogman, we look at it as a canine type of creature with an exceptionally high IQ or intelligence level. And
seems to have strategy.
It operates with strategy, and in a lot of the cases, you get instances where people report mind speak, a mental telepathy type thing, which is preternatural in and of itself. A lot of times, I think the dogman phenomenon, when they encounter somebody, the intent is to scare them or affect them in an emotional way. I think that's the true intent of it, and that sounds preternatural, which is preternatural. In Roman Catholicism, there are 3 levels. There's the natural world, there's the preternatural world, and there's the supernatural world. The natural world we're all familiar with. The supernatural world is of God, which is the supernatural power to create something from nothing. In between, it's called the preternatural. The preternatural is a level of natural that the entities that have a preternatural ability can manipulate the physical universe, but they cannot create or destroy it.
No, they can't create it. Here's Rick, I wanted to say something about that. One of the things I know that I was discussing this with someone a while back, and they had studied theology. You know, this guy wasn't claiming to be the be all end all of anything, but he had a lot of knowledge. And one of the things that he told me was the most dangerous forms of entities, because according to him, now this is a guy that actually helped my brother, who was a Satanist. Okay, he was a devout Satanist. He helped my brother come to Christ. Okay, now the funny thing is about this guy, okay, was that he had a Buddhist philosophy, but he was a Christian in his faith. But his philosophy, because he claimed that Buddhism wasn't really supposed to be a religion, it was supposed to be a philosophy that you live by. But he had the Christian faith. He believed in Christ. He prayed to God through Christ, all that. Now, he did help my brother come to Christ. So that was something, because my brother was bad. I mean, I'm not going to lie. He was a bad dude. I had some problems with him, man. And he did some things in my old house that I think exacerbated some of the problems that we already had in that house. And I think some things were done and it just made it worse. And some of the things that we were seeing got progressively worse. If you go back and reference my show, we talk about it. But this guy helped. And one of the things he told me was, he said that there is a type of entity that's way worse than anything that we can, you know, and he said it's because it doesn't play by any rules or laws. It's only bound by your imagination. And he said that it is a thought form.
A tulpa.
And he said, well, sort of. Tulpa is a little bit different. It's like the manifestation of like you creation, you know.
Correct.
But it is similar.
Okay.
But the thought form is like a tulpa. I guess it is a tulpa, but it's a tulpa that's gone off the reservation.
It's one without limitations.
Without limits, yes. And he said that now demons, you know, are supposed to follow a certain rule. Rules.
The cosmic rule.
There's a cosmic rule that he goes, if not, you would see possession everywhere. It would just be, and then you do see oppression everywhere, but you don't see everybody just running, flopping around, you know, being possessed by demons, because they have an order that they have to follow. But these thought forms come from the thoughts of man. Now, they can be influenced by demons to create these things in your mind, but when you give them a free rein and they use the human energy, now, I'm not saying this is what I believe. I'm just saying this is what somebody told me, and I want to preface that with that, you know, that's what he was telling me, was that's where this comes from. A lot of this, you know, and he said that these things are what you see. Like, he really believed that's what that dogman was. It was the thoughts of man had created this subspecies, and he called them archons. I don't know if that's a correct term or not, but that's what he called them. And I think that was just his own term that he gave them because he didn't know what to call them. But he said that when you're dealing with the different types of entities, which are basically all just a different type of demon, you know, but he said that they are not, these thought forms are completely different. He said that they don't follow any rules. You can try to make them do this and do that. They don't stop. They don't adhere to anything.
Try to make them.
Yeah, and according to him, it was like it all just depended on their energy. And once their energy is gone, then they were gone. But he said that they were created by man, because our minds have the ability to create. And he said that's why you have to be very vigilant and what you think and how you think it.
That old adage, be careful your thoughts, because those thoughts become words, words become actions, actions become habits, and then those habits are, testimony of character.
When you bring that into this reality, now what do you think of that, you guys?
There's a lot that we do not know. I mean, even when you go to Scripture and in the Bible, even the apostles said there are certain things Christ taught that would fill volumes that they just don't have the time. We just don't know everything. When people think of the demonic, they think of the fallen angels and what they see on TV. But the truth about the demonic is each individual fallen angel is an individual species in and of itself. They're arranged in a hierarchy. And you've got the lower soldiers, the lower ranked soldiers. Then you've got what's equivalent to the sergeants, lieutenants, the captains, the colonels. But when you get to the higher realms of the demonic, the diabolical, then you don't know what you might be dealing with. You're dealing with an intelligence that surpasses ours by, I can't gauge it. And they've been around for quite a long time, and they're very intelligent. They know precisely, what to do. They're very powerful. Not as powerful as God, but they are very, very powerful, and they can, seem to have a godlike presence or power that that's immeasurable. But in the long term, I don't believe that they're as omnipotent as God or as powerful. He's the creator, and we're all creations or creatures. So, again, I can't speak to what he believes because I don't know everything. The only thing I know is what my research has shown and what my work has shown. And but it's a very interesting concept that he comes up with. I'll have to look into that. That's very interesting.
Yeah, that's something that he believed fully, because I know that I have dealt with a lot of people who've done drugs. I used to run a nightclub, so you're around it, and there's people that would flip out and just start, like something was on them, something was attacking them. Now, modern science would say, okay, they're under the influence of a hallucinogenic drug. But I know that you can have a hallucination with someone and you both see it. That kind of ceases to be a hallucination and starts to be
a reality.
It's a glimpse into something else. Yeah. I will admit that I have taken peyote once years ago, and I was with several other people, and they saw the same thing I did, and I was asking them, I'm like, are you seeing the same thing that I'm seeing? And I've only done it once, but it was very powerful. The people that I did it with, they were natives and Native Americans, and they gave it to me, the button as they call it. And when I saw these reptilian-looking demonic entities, they saw the same thing I did. And it was just like, are you seeing this? And then, I saw this like shadowy-looking wolf thing that came out of the smoke. Everybody saw the same thing. Like, how is that possible? Like I'm asking them, what are you seeing? And they're telling me what I'm seeing.
Yeah, the reason the church is, I'm looking at things from the perspective of the church. The reason the church doesn't advocate the hallucinogens and drugs of that sort is because it not only does it affect you mentally, emotionally, psychologically, but it also can affect you spiritually. It could remove that small veil of spirituality there, and you could you open yourself up to these things. A lot of people that I've heard that practiced Buddha, and they would sit and meditate. A lot of times they'd open themselves up to the point where they were actually attacked demonically, and they had to seek help from the church. A lot of Buddhists, a lot of people who are into this astral projection, that type of thing. They open themselves up, and it's a matter of invitation. There's the law of invitation, attraction, and so forth. If you invite something in, the cosmic law of invitation, they're going to take you up on it. And they'll come and they'll wreak havoc with your spiritual life. They'll wreak havoc with your physical, your mental, your emotional. That's the reason they don't promote the use of any hallucinogens, because you'll pretty much open yourself up like that.
And I always compare it to like going deep sea fishing. You don't know what you're going to catch.
No, you don't.
The ocean is so vast, and you're out there fishing, and you don't know. I mean, you might get a marlin or you might get a mako shark. You don't know what you're going to pull up.
You might get a flounder. Who knows?
You don't know. I mean, and so when you're out there throwing the trawl net out there and drudging up whatever comes up, it's whatever you get.
It's a potluck.
It's like, these people that do this automatic writing and these spiritual things, and Ouija boards and seances and, these type of things, they're opening themselves up. And it's like a chat room. You don't know who you're speaking with, and you don't know how bad that person is.
That's a good analogy.
It's a very good analogy.
Good analogy.
Considering that some people consider computers to be
the end all be all.
I think
that's the new medium right now. A lot of satanic groups are using media to actually pass on curses. The cartels south of the border, not all of them, but some of them are satanic. You ever heard the Madre de Muertos?
Yeah. Well, and they say God created me, Jesus saved me, but she protects me.
Yeah, it looks like the Our Lady of Guadalupe.
It's a
skeletal figure of Our Lady of Guadalupe, and a lot of them are satanic. And what they do is they put curses on the drugs. A lot of them to increase their
potency,
precisely, and their addictive attributes.
Yeah, and the reason that they depict her as the skeletal is because she's Lady Death.
Yes.
Whereas the mother Mary was the gave life,
right,
to our Savior.
Precisely.
Yeah,
and it started out. Well, I think some of these cartels approached the church and they wanted the church's blessing on certain things, and the church says we can't do that.
Exactly.
And they're like, so we'll come up with our own deity. And unfortunately, it was a negative, demonic, whatever you want to call it. And if you run into people who have these cards, be careful, because it doesn't mean it's a fairy tale we're talking about here. This is very serious stuff, and they're very serious.
The whole adopting of a negative entity. Well, I guess you can also take that take into account that helps to have a psychological impact on their enemies, for lack of better words, right? Now, before we digressed, and we were talking about the Sasquatch and the dogman and so on and so forth, and you guys recently have started to walk down that path, and of course, Wolf having his encounter, and he saw it, in its glory, full flesh and blood. Have you guys had any type of
nothing
contact
glorious
like that?
about it?
We're pretty much
that was in quotation marks, brother.
Yeah, pretty much our group with regard to Dogman is pretty much in its infancy right now. We're just starting to investigate this thing. We've been out. I do a lot of field work. I just came back from one a couple nights ago. No activity, nothing to report there. But we go out and we actually, a lot of times we hear about reports of Dogman, that type of thing, and we'll go there and set up camp, try to interview who we can, check the area out, and so forth. But we haven't, we had an incident a couple weeks ago where we went out in southwestern part of Virginia called Lee County near the Kentucky border. We were investigating a dogman incident there. It was our second visit. And the first visit, it was quite interesting because we heard a lot of activity around us, growls at night. One of our guys actually got thermal hits on objects moving around the campsite that did not register heat, which was unusual. And the following day, we checked this particular area out, and we found tree structures and that type of thing. So, very weird area. We went back again a couple weeks ago. And, the first time we went was maybe a year ago, October, and we went back a couple weeks ago, and a couple of our members actually saw a large, dark figure, probably 7 to 8 feet tall. One witness said it looked like he had a hoodie on, and the other witness said it looked like a squatch, quote unquote squatch, with the crest on its head. But it was watching us from the wood line in this particular hollow. We call it a hollow. We've nicknamed it Booger Holler because we get a lot of activity in there. But other than those two sightings and what happened in the original investigation a year or so ago, we haven't really experienced anything. My main thrust in this research is not necessarily experiencing it, but interviewing those people who have experienced it. Again, I like to do a timeline interview. I like to know where they were at psychologically, physically, spiritually, at the time they witnessed these things, what was happening in their life at the time, what type of problems they might have been having, what type of issues they might have been having, what type of spiritual life they had, or if they'd been dabbling or so forth. That's my main thrust in this, is not necessarily experiencing the dogman phenomena, but going to the people who witness these things and working with them. Because a lot of these people, it's a long-lasting trauma for them after they've witnessed it. I think that's fascinating, and I'd like to get into the bottom of that and find out what if any connections there might be.
Well, you got a good source, or a good a good subject here. You could ask Wolf all those questions offline, and he, like I said, he saw it up close and personal, and it
and the area where we're from, the legends were there already, and it's mostly from the older generation that's unfortunately dying off, but they would always tell us not to be going out and playing around at night. The guy that I saw it with became a preacher. I mean, like, he saw it and he thought it's demonic. His mother always said it was demonic.
Are these Native American is this the Native American cultures?
No. It's my mother's Mexican and my dad's white, but and actually have
it's the Hispanic side of all of this.
Yeah, I have a Comanche grandmother though.
Yeah,
but
my father was Mexican. My mother was from West Virginia. So what a mix, right?
Yeah,
yeah.
I thought you sounded like you might be Latino, but I wasn't for sure.
A little bit, yeah. That's poco, hablo un poquito. So
yeah, that my dad's white, but on the Latino side, and when I grew up.
Mm-hmm.
That my tia in particular, she would always tell me stories about these things, and I thought these are just stories. It started one day when I was at her house in Temple, Texas. I'll never forget. And we were watching with her boyfriend named Manuel. He was a good guy.
Mm-hmm.
I liked hanging out with him. He was always really nice to me as a kid. And we were watching The Wolf Man with Lon Chaney. The original
classic. Yeah.
And it was, and she had one of those big TVs with the wooden.
Yeah. The console TVs.
The big nice one, because she worked so hard. She was a seamstress her whole life. And she had this nice big TV, and we were watching The Wolf Man, and she came home and told me to turn it off. And I was like, why? I'm like a 9-year-old kid. I'm like, I want to see this. And she's like, no. And he was like, come on. It's just a monster movie. Just a monster movie, He's a little kid. Let him watch it. And she's like, no, and then when later on we talked about it, which when I would stay with her, I had to go to church, the Catholic church. Of course, she was Catholic. I'm not Catholic, but she was
Catholic, so I know the deal.
And so I had to go to mass with her and everything. And I remember always going on Christmas Eve. My mom would always make me go with her, And so
that wasn't an option for them.
No, it wasn't. And so and my grandmother on my dad's side, which would that would be his stepmom, but he had her since he was like 11 years old. She was Catholic too, and so I had to go to CCD and all this stuff to kind of to please them. But I am a Christian, but I'm not Catholic. I lean more toward Orthodox, I guess, if I had to say what I am. I don't really like to get into religion or politics too much, but what I was told by her though was that these things exist, and I'm thinking in my mind, in my little kid mind, the Wolf Man. You're thinking, what is that? And I remember laughing about it, and then she got real serious about it, and she says, La Llorona, La Chusa, El Hombre Lobo. She goes, this all real. And I was just like, okay. I really just was not into hearing all that mentiras. I thought it was all just a bunch of bull. You're just telling stories to keep me in line, to scare me so I won't go off and do something bad. But then when I was 15, I saw it. And for the rest of my life, I'll never forget it. For the rest of my life, I was like, these things are real. They really exist. It had a very profound effect on me and the guy that I was with. We both saw it. Me and him were walking, and
it was no shared hallucination.
It was no shared hallucination. Yeah, and it went up to the house, and members of his family saw it. And and at my little nephew's graduation, my wife was with me, and we saw him in May, and he told my wife the story. She had never met him, and he said, "Oh yeah," and he started telling it from his perspective, what happened to him. And my wife was blown away. She was like, "Wow, it sounded just like what I've been saying." I mean, it wasn't like, I hadn't seen the guy in 3 years, like face to face, but he told it just like what I said happened. I mean, that's what happened. And the terrifying thing about it is when you start thinking in your head later on, you're like, what else is real?
Yeah. What else is out there?
Because I really just thought it was all just a big joke. And then my mother told me years later, because when I told my mom what happened, when she was mad at me for being late, but when I told her what happened, she never said another word. And my mom is a Mexican mom that was not one of those to be like, oh, that's okay, you were late, mijo. No.
You're going to pay.
You were going to, yeah. She was going to get you and hit you with every syllable, dude.
You get the chancla too, you know?
She was going to hit you with...
So does your family have a history of this type of thing dating back?
No. I don't know if my great aunt ever saw one, but she believed in them. Now, I have a distant cousin that saw one in that same area where my mom grew up. She said that the night that my uncle died, when her brother, when he died real young, he was murdered. And he was brutally murdered, and he was thrown in the yard. He was left in the yard. Yeah, it was horrible, and they never solved the case. My mother and her siblings believe they know who did it, but they couldn't prove it type thing, you know? And he was murdered, and my mom said that night she heard these wolves howling, you know, down by the creek, what they call Mustang Creek. And this, it's a creek that's down behind the projects where she used to live. My mother grew up in the projects. And she said that she heard it howling all night. And I, you know, years later, she told me that she thinks it was maybe something supernatural, or as you would call it, preternatural, which is just, she never ridiculed me or told me that she didn't believe in what I had said. Is this
the first time your family ever experienced anything like that when he died or was killed?
No, you know, I don't think she ever saw them or you know, and I don't know about her sisters. Now, I know one of her sisters died back in 2000, and she always claimed that she believed in that. Like there was, you know, she believed in all this.
Those wolves were out there.
Yeah, she believed in it. And then my great aunt that died, I guess she died in, Anthony, when did Jehovah die? I'm trying to think. I don't want to, 2015? Yeah, I spoke at her funeral. I was very close to her. She was like my surrogate grandmother, because my abuelita died when I was real little bitty, and I barely remember her at all. And so, you know, she was kind of my surrogate grandmother. She really was. And I was very close to her, very close. And she always told me these things were real. Now, when I told her the story, what happened to me, she looked at me and she's like, stop sewing for a minute. And she told me, that's why you don't go out after dark. And it just kept sewing. And that was just very matter of fact. She didn't stop and go, wow, that's interesting. You know, and then she told me that she didn't like to talk about it. She lived alone in the south end of town, and there wasn't hardly anyone else around where she lived. She was the last house in town.
As you're leaving town, going south, you know, from Taylor going toward Elgin. And she always said that she didn't want to talk about these things because she knew they were out there. She was scared of them. It would bring them around.
Yeah, and not far from where her house was, like I said, a distant relative of mine was chased by one of these things. Now what happened to her happened in December, and what happened to me happened in October. And the description of it, I think, was the same creature. You know,
how old were you at the time when you saw this?
I was 15.
Okay,
when it happened to me. And so, you know, I always thought that maybe that could have been the same entity, you know, that she saw that chased her, you know. And it was weird because her dad was an alcoholic, and he had been attacking her mother. And so she had to get all of her stuff, and, you know, with her little brother, and they had to run out of the house and leave, and they had to cross over that bridge where my mother claimed that she heard that howling the night that my uncle died. And this thing chased her.
I'm sorry, but how did your uncle die? I don't want to get graphic or anything, but
he was beaten to death, and he was choked. So, I mean, head trauma and strangulation. You take your pick, either one, because it was both.
Sad.
Yeah, and he was only 18.
Wow.
And so my mother, you know, she was very close that was her favorite sibling, you know, and they were very close and close to age too. And I know that had a very profound effect on her. And I think that it was almost like when we would talk about it, and one day when she told me and my wife and one of my sisters, she told us about the howling that she heard that night. She said that she always thought that it was something inhuman. It wasn't a wolf. It wasn't a coyote. It was something
something else.
Some sort of demonic something that was like saying,
it might behoove you to delve a little bit into your family history and talk to your relatives, especially the older ones, to see what type of connection that might have. Because in the Hispanic community, especially not necessarily Mexico per se, but in Central America and so forth, they have people that they delve into occult practices like Santeria.
Oh yeah, we talk about that on the show too in Mexican folklore.
Brujos and all those. The
santeros, curanderos, all the
exactly, and they're into spell work and things of that sort. So I'm just wondering if your family could have been the victim of something like that.
I don't know that it was a familial curse. I really think that it would have been. I would have noticed something like more. There's only really one relative left from that older generation, from that World War II generation, and I'm not really on speaking terms with him, so I can't really. There's no way to connect to them anymore. That, like I said, that generation's almost gone. But I know that some of the ones on my dad's side believed in things too, like my grandfather. I mean, on my dad's side, he was Warlul, but he believed in it because he saw one in Louisiana, and he saw what he called the coyote,
coyote men.
Coyote monitos, and he would see them when he was out in West Texas
near Candelaria.
Yeah, and he claimed to see them, and he was a truck driver for like 30 years, and he saw all kinds of weird stuff, And so he believed in that stuff wholeheartedly. He was Catholic. Now he converted because my grandmother that he married was Czech, and she was Catholic.
A lot of theologians say that God does create these things, and he allows certain things to happen to us spiritually because it's to help us grow spiritually.
I agree with that. I grew up Catholic. Come from a Catholic family, all this other stuff. I'm now more or less a wayward Catholic. I'm not as devout as I should be, but there's some things that I don't agree with a doctrine, because it doesn't make sense to me, such as Leviticus 13:20. We won't get into that, but
Leviticus itself is kind of strange too.
Right. But to warrant death because a person, is oriented this way just to, no, I'm sorry, that doesn't make sense. Yeah. That's like saying
when you get back into the Older Testament scripture writings, that was a different time and a different people.
Well, also, I believe in the Old Testament a lot of it was just practicality.
Yeah.
A lot of stuff was made like don't eat pork because pork
at
would
the time
kill
was
you
bad.
because if you undercooked it at all, you could die. They didn't know what it was that caused it.
Back then were very, very crude and savage back then, more so than they are now. And maybe God decided to spank them a little bit harder then than he would want to spank them now.
Yeah, true. I mean, let me ask you a question though, Rick. You and your wife. Let me ask you guys. In all the cases that you've done, I heard Sal ask you earlier. Now he said that what was the most,
memorable,
yeah. Like you yourself. Now you have a background in law enforcement. How long have you yourself, Rick, been doing the investigations of the paranormal?
Well, let's see. I was doing EVP work when I was 12 years old.
Wow.
Because the house I grew up in was notoriously haunted.
I knew it. I was trying to get to that. I didn't want to just ask you point blank, hey, did you grow up in a haunted house? Because that's a lot of times how people end up. I just recently took my wife out to the country to a house I lived in when I was a kid, and it was haunted. Now I'm not talking like the one that I lived in for years here in Austin, but it had stuff in it, and even driving by it and seeing it and showing it to her and my nephew, I'm sitting there going like, I could feel it from looking at it. Yeah. And I knew you had to have had some kind of background there. Go ahead.
Yeah, I grew up in a house. My brother, he dabbled a lot. And unfortunately, he dabbled in some dark arts. And on occasion, I was the recipient of the effects of that. And it got me very interested. It sparked my interest. And I've been pretty much, I've been pretty weird all my life, see. But because of the weird experiences I've had, and I've had in a curiosity about that stuff for a very, very, very long time. I can remember being in grade school researching the subject of the paranormal, doing EVP work, staying up all night with friends of mine, trying to record things, trying to see things, trying to document things. I've just been doing this all my life, and I've had a real, deep interest in it. And it just wasn't until maybe my early 30s, that I started taking an active interest in joining some groups and started doing my own research and so forth. But yeah, there's definite background in it. Absolutely. It's like it's my nature. I mean, it's my nature to be a protector. Ever since I was really very, very small, I've always had that attribute to my personality where I'm a protector. I'm the sheepdog. And I don't like people being oppressed, obsessed, bullied, that type of thing. I'm always sticking up for them, when I'm always trying to help people like that. And, this subject just goes right into that. And a lot of these people that are experiencing these things, they'll stand there and they'll look at you with tears in their eyes. They've got pain in their heart, and they're experiencing something traumatic, something that is horrible. And I cannot, nor will I, turn my back on these people. I'll do whatever I can to help them. And if I can't do it, I'll refer them to somebody who can, because that's just part of my nature. I'm just more of a protector, and always has been since I was a little boy.
Folks, that's all the time we have for today. We'll be finishing up this 3-part series on Friday. And you guys, make sure that you follow me, like I said before, prtpodcast.com on YouTube also, and Spotify, SoundCloud. And make sure to like and subscribe. And my email address, once again, is daswolfman88@gmail.com. daswolfman88@gmail.com. Send me your scary stories, even if you just think it's scary to you, okay? Send it to me and let me find out if it's because a lot of people say, well, I don't think it's show worthy. Well, just send it to me and we'll see. We'll talk, okay? So anyways, from whatever forest you're running in terror from Bigfoot, whatever house you're trying to escape from an evil ghost, good night.